We are back on Morning Line. It's our final segment this morning with Professor Robert Odell from over at Vanderbilt. Was there the day that Apollo 11 launched. Was obviously someone who was a close follower of exactly what happened with the space program and where we stand today. I was just curious as we went to the break, the speed that the rockets and these modules travel at once they get to outer space. You were telling me maybe 16,000 miles an hour?
That's the speed for something in orbit.
Okay.
And the way the spaceship went to the moon was first to go into Earth orbit at this 16,000 miles an hour. And after they had made sure that everything was working and were in the right position with respect to the Earth and moon, then they fired the single rocket that was on the top of the kludge of pieces at that time. And so at that time they increased their speed several thousand, I don't know just how many, several thousand miles an hour, that allowed them to gradually escape the gravitational field of the Earth. And once you got to and that was just enough to put them at the right speed to go into orbit around the moon.
Okay. So, I mean, are the new rockets going to be capable of traveling at greater speeds than, say, the Saturn V for traveling greater distances in shorter amount of time?
That's what's necessary. In terms of going to, say, Mars, there are certain times when it's very favorable to launch. And so you could do it, there are technologies, you could do it much more slowly, but then the problem of being bombarded by cosmic rays becomes much, much worse. So there's essentially an optimum speed for transiting to Mars, and that requires a much higher velocity than for Earth orbit.
You know, it's interesting, so much of what we see in the movies, from Star Wars and everything else, and it's wonderful imaginative stuff and the travel, but the truth is, if humankind ever wants to travel, say, even beyond, as individuals, beyond Mars, we're going to have some kind of huge technological breakthrough with regard to speed, whether it approaches that we can travel at the speed of light or something like this, to go to other galaxies. That's just, I mean, is that even something that can be considered?
Oh, of course, because they did back in the 60s and are doing today what had not been thought possible just decades before. And indeed, there are multiple experiments with different ways of achieving the speeds to go even outside the solar system. And they just all seem fantastical at this point. Oh, this can't work. And yet, visionary people are willing to try them. Of course. And most of these will be discarded, but it only takes one.
Yeah. Well, the power source is what? Isn't that part of it, the fuel source? And not only having a structure that could handle a speed approaching that of light, but also having a power source. What would that be, nuclear fission? Or?
No, probably not, because for example, there's something called solar sailing, where you take if you put a big flat sheet out there, and the sun is shining on it, just the light from the sun pushes it out.
Okay.
Now, something like the space shuttle or the ships to the moon, that's not very important because they're small and compact objects. But if you put an enormous solar cell that does a sail, I should say, that's very large, sun shining on, it will accelerate it to speeds faster than we can get with rockets, or we can achieve otherwise with just rockets. So things, but in this case, it takes a long time to achieve these high speeds.
Yeah, to build it up, yeah.
So that, yes, that technology will probably work, but it would if you were going to the next star, light years away, then the whole thing's going to take multiple generations to get there.
I was looking at your vitae, and among other things, I know you've been very much involved, I guess, with the Hubble telescope.
Yes.
And what that has seen, and it's opened up a lot of eyes in terms of just what's beyond us. I mean, with the Hubble, does that help create some targets for our space exploration now, in your mind?
It is certainly involved with the study of exoplanets, that is, planets around other stars. But the Hubble was designed back in the 70s, and so it is doing many things that it was not designed to do, and it is successfully doing things like determining the chemical composition of some of these exoplanets. But it's to the next generation of big telescopes in space, like the James Webb telescope, that will give us much more information. So Hubble was primarily built as a deep space observatory. That is, one that would study deep space rather than individual planets around nearby stars, which had never been detected at that time.
See, as far as detection, we just have a few minutes left, and I don't mean to be trivializing anything here or putting you on the spot, but you're a distinguished research professor, Department of Physics, Astronomy at Vanderbilt. You've followed and been involved in the space program for much of your life, and you take it very seriously. I'm just curious, with all that you've seen and observed, not that you've ever witnessed anything of this, but do you believe that there is likely to be life out there, other life?
I have no doubt that there is. That when we look now and see so many planets having been formed around other stars, and we're able, it's very difficult to detect them. So you can safely conclude that formation of planets is a normal thing when a star is formed. Our galaxy, or local galaxy, has hundreds of, probably 100 billion stars in it. So think how many planets are there. They're made of the same material that our solar system was made of. So the same chemicals are forming on those planets that, in our case, successfully led to the creation of life. So those same physics laws and chemistry laws are being observed everywhere else in the universe, so that we know this process must be occurring elsewhere. And if it led to intelligent, sentient life, we like to think we're good examples. You and I are examples of that. Then it almost certainly has occurred elsewhere.
Fascinating. I agree with you, and I think that's something that I think gives us all hope in that there may be other planets that can be inhabited even by us with time, if the travel comes on. Professor, this has been fascinating.
It has been my pleasure.
Well, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. You're a very interesting man, and this was a perfect show to do on a day like today, and maybe we'll do more on this if you're available, but I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure meeting you. And thank you for taking time out of your morning for us.
I'm happy to share my part of the story.
Very, very neat. Well, Professor Robert Odell from over at Vanderbilt, thank you again for coming on. We'll take a break. I'll be back with a programming note about tomorrow. Thank you.